Hello and welcome to Lone Star Silver Screen, a podcast about everything that exists at the intersection of Texas and the movies. I'm your host, Austin Zook, and on today's episode, I am being joined by a very dear friend of mine. Shane Longoria is on the podcast today. Shane is a movie lover, a music lover, a public servant, a lover of dogs, a lover of all things, really. They are one of my absolute favorite people to talk about art with, and I am so glad that I got them on this episode to talk about a film that we both have a lot of affection for. Ethan Hawke's 2018 biopic of musician Blaze Foley, Blaze. Shane was actually very generously my guinea pig when I first started recording these episodes, and the audio file was corrupted, and we had to re-record the episode. So I want you to bear that in mind when you listen to this. This is take 2, just because Shane loves me and was willing to do that. But I did want to call out because this was a little earlier in my podcasting journey, and we were just doing this ad hoc on Shane's couch. The audio is a little rough in a couple of places, but overall everything turned out great, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. So, without further ado, let's jump to my conversation with Shane. Shane Longoria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So you and I are going to talk about a movie we both love today. Ethan Hawke's 2018 film Blaze, a biopic about the life of musician and outlaw country artist Blaze Foley. Before we get into that, though, I told you last time that I've always wanted to have an icebreaker if I ever had a podcast. And now that I do, my icebreaker is going to be an over-under question. Do you remember what the question was the first time we recorded this?
I do remember.
Would you like to say?
Yeah, so the question was, is ear piercings on men?
Men wearing one earring.
One earring, like a single hoop.
Single hoop.
Or with whether that's over or underrated. I do remember this. I did say that I think, generally speaking, men with piercings tend to get a pretty bad rep just because of the sort of gender essentialist and reductive nature of like how we classify certain types of behaviors. So men wearing certain piercings, people would say, oh, that's performative male behavior or a male manipulator. So I think in that it has given the single piercing a sort of bad reputation.
Yeah, for sure.
That I don't think is fair. So I think it's an underrated thing. I think it's should be celebrated more and not looked at with suspicion.
I completely agree. And last time we did this, I told you that I just watched Deep Cover with Larry Fishburne, and yeah. I was like, man, that's a fantastic look because he just has the one gold hoop in that.
Yeah, movie. Larry Fishburne,
a young man.
Yeah, that's hot. I think it's really hot. I think men should have more piercings. I think they need to have more piercings. And well, I mean, I guess we're talking about a single piercing, but yeah, it's a very hot look. I think it's great, and I think we should be celebrating it. Yeah.
So let's get into the movie.
Absolutely, let's do it.
As I mentioned, it was released in 2018, directed by Ethan Hawke, a native Texan who you and I both love. So it's about Blaze Foley, and I would not call Foley a household name. So he's a guy who never really hit it big, though his music has lived on. He was originally from Arkansas, but was part of the music scene in Austin. And this film makes it seem like one of the reasons he never hit his stride with his career was he had a problem with alcohol, right? There are multiple scenes of him on stage performing, 3 sheets to the wind. And unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to work through those problems. He was murdered in 1989 by a son of a friend of his, which is depicted in the film. Spoiler alert, I guess, but you know.
That's called the public record, man.
It happened in the 80s.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this with you is because you are a big fan of this type of music, this era of music, and in addition to loving the film, I think you and I both have a fondness for this sort of off the beaten path career for a musician. Like this is kind of similar to Inside Llewyn Davis in some ways.
Yeah.
So could you help me contextualize Blaze Foley and the movement he was part of?
Outlaw Country?
Yeah.
Well, if you ask Willie Nelson, he'll tell you that Outlaw Country was just a marketing term by some rich suits in Nashville to sell records. Not entirely wrong, but there is there's a general kind of artistic truth around it. So basically, like Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, they were still coming up in Nashville kind of during that sort of Nashville sound era of a more like cosmopolitan kind of bringing in elements of like conventional pop music into like a country context to make it more palatable to a larger audience. And it was very like assembly line type stuff. You had your session musicians, you had your songwriters, you had like these very like A plus B plus C equals, what, like it was very formulaic and it was like a machine. And they were kind of producing and like manufacturing these artists and like telling them, this is what you sing, this is who you are, this is how you present. But it wasn't always the case for certain artists like a Willie or a Waylon, kind of be a little more experimental, do things a little more on their terms as artists. Because whenever you're working within the Nashville machine, you don't really work on your terms, you work on the terms of the producer and basically the record companies. Like those are the ones that call the shots. Guys like Willie and Waylon, they wanted to kind of push beyond that and think about all the different influences and styles that went into the kind of music they wanted to make, even just from the basic, from the presentation. You look at pictures of Willie Nelson in the 60s, he's in like, short hair, all slicked back in the suit, trying to do like the Jim Reeves thing with like, the Nashville sound under like Owen Bradley. And so basically Outlaw Country was kind of a reaction to that sort of conventional setup of country music. Artists who wanted to kind of make music on their terms with a little more edge, a little more rebellion, a little more bringing themselves into the music. So that's kind of where you saw like, they started growing out their hair, growing beards, dressing like a bunch of hooligans. And so it was people like, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, David Allan Coe, Jessie Coulter, Waylon Jennings' wife, was also one that was kind of associated with this. But of course, I said with anything, once anything becomes successful in a music industry, in any industry, entertainment industry, it then becomes, like this sort of label to profit off of. So it eventually did become what Willie Nelson is talking about, that sort of marketing term for bridge suits in Nashville. But essentially what it boils down to is country artists pushing against the sort of manufactured nature of the Nashville industry and trying to create music on their own terms.
And so as far as when this was really going on, I mean, before it became just kind of a marketing gimmick, what would you say the period was where you could be like a real outlaw country artist actually trying to push against something?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the 70s, because I think because Willie and Waylon were both, still active in like the 60s, and they were making that kind of like Nashville. I mean, pop country is a whole loaded term that we're not going to get into here, but this, for the sake of this discussion, like they were still a part of that for sure. So I think it was like late 60s, kind of into the 70s when, they start coming out with some of those a little more edgier albums, a little more rock in there, a little more blues in there, a little more folk in there, and they kind of blend it together. So yeah, I would say I think it was definitely like I would say the 70s were kind of like what people conventionally think of as like the outlaw era of country music.
And so Blaze would have been around that time, but also a little past it, right?
Yeah. So he definitely saw all of it become what it became. And so, yeah, by the 80s and stuff, I would think that outlaw became that sort of catch-all term for like a different kind of country. But yeah, but he never ascended to any of those heights to find out for himself.
Right. Yeah, no, he died tragically young.
Oh, yeah.
So today, where we're at now musically,
yeah,
I mean, do we have actual outlaw country artists working today, or is it just a gimmick still?
That's a tough one, because I do think there are definitely country artists making music on their own terms. I mean, you have guys like Charlie Crockett, Tyler Childers, Casey Musgraves, you could even argue at some point, maybe, because, she has never, like, she has one #1 hit on country radio, and that was the duet with Zach Bryan. Like,
another great
outlaw country musician. But yeah, I think it's really tough, because now you have like dipshits like Gavin Adcock who think that it can, like, all you have to do is just drink a lot of beer, you just raise the finger a lot at people and tell them to fuck off, and just being a real dipshit. Like, we went to high school with guys like Gavin Adcock. Like, I don't know if you know, do you know who Gavin Adcock is?
I know the name.
Or anyway, if you ever were to like listen to him speak, you're like, oh,
yeah,
I know this guy.
he would have been hanging out.
He's a guy that fancies himself as like a modern day outlaw, but like he opened up for Morgan Wallen. You know, like he sold himself to these record labels. So it's tough because for him, outlaw means like just a loud mouth, you know, rebel country boy. And it's tough to say, but I do think there's great country music being made on artists' own terms. That's really good today. I think it's tough with the outlaw label just because it's been so muddied by like, you know, it's become itself a part of the Nashville machine in a lot of ways, like the aesthetic, the idea of it. But I do think if we're talking about artists kind of pushing back against the Nashville standard of how to make music and how to like be an artist on your own terms, I for sure think so. You could ascribe the outlaw label to some artists out there. Sturgill Simpson, I think, is another, a modern example, you know, because he like, you know, famously would, you know, protest the CMAs and stuff like that.
Right.
And things. So I think there is room for that. I think it's just, it's become such a hard thing to define because of how caught up in the sort of industry aspect of things. So, yeah, it's kind of a tough question, but I think so.
Okay, fantastic. So something we should talk about before we go any further is that you and I have kind of an aversion to traditional biopics.
Is that what you would call it?
So our shorthand that you and I have used for years is when we see one and it's really bad, we say, oh, that director should have watched Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know, do you want to describe what Walk Hard is?
Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. So it's kind of, it's a parody of conventional music biopics starring the great John C. Reilly.
Yes.
Yeah, the one of our greatest, which I would look at it as sort of like amalgamation of like Ray and Walk the Line. Like, I think those are the two biggest wells that it was drawing from. But then, like, you know, the lives of other artists like Brian Wilson and like that. But in terms of like the way it's structured, it like looked at Ray, because it came out like in 2006 or 7.
Yeah.
Right after those movies.
Right.
So like, and those were two of the most successful like biopics at the time. You know, it's like, I think it's kind of like this amalgamation of those two movies.
Yeah.
And kind of like, you know, sort of presenting to you like just how the way in which these stories are constructed, kind of bullshit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So in particular, we don't like when they take like a womb to tomb approach, when it's like, this is how he was born and this is his career and this is how he died.
Or like every biopic has it. The moment where like they play the first note.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone in the room, their eyes, you know, get big. Like, you saw this in the fucking Dirt, the Motley Crue biopic. They did fucking Live Wire, and he sang like the first note, the guy playing Vince Steele, and there was a woman. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Even Motley Crue gets it? Yeah, like you see, like every one of them has it. That one, they all know they're witnessing history.
Right, like no one ever has the courage to just film that and be like, oh, that was pretty good.
That's pretty good. Time will tell.
So, with all that said, did Ethan Hawke watch Walk Hard?
I hope he did.
Yeah, do you? This movie learn those lessons?
Yeah, if he didn't, he definitely like took all the right lessons from Walk Hard. Because this is not a movie about glory. This is a guy who loses and loses often. Whereas like the joke in Walk Hard is that like he goes through this, but he always still finds a way to win, you know? And like that's kind of the funny part is like he goes on all these drugs and like ruins all these marriages, but he still gets his like glory at the end. And,
right.
You know, and like, you know, this is not a movie that at all.
Yeah, spoiler alert for anyone at home. This is not an uplifting film. If you couldn't tell by the fact we talked about how the main character is murdered.
We talked about that right off the bat.
But even with that, like, it's not oppressively sad. Like, there are funny moments. There's a lot of life and a lot of joy in it. Like,
a lot of hope.
Yeah, it's hopeful too. It's just also very like, sucks.
Yeah. I think it has a very good holistic, and I think Ethan Hawke is really good at that. Like, he has like a real holistic look at life in all of like in all of the shit, but in all of like the beautiful moments as well. It all kind of, he sees it kind of like weave together, you know, in a lot of ways.
Well, speaking of it weaving together, let's talk a little bit about the structure of the film. So this movie has a nonlinear narrative, and essentially it uses two framing devices. So one is a radio interview with Townes Van Zandt, played by Charlie Sexton, and a character named Z, played by Josh Hamilton. They're being interviewed by Ethan Hawke. And then the other is Blaze Foley is doing a recording at the Outhouse, which is a honky tonk. And he's basically making a live album on the day that he ultimately dies. And so the movie is moving back and forth between those and then jumping around in time from Blaze's life. Do you think that was an effective way to tell this story?
Yeah, I think it was great because you're getting to see kind of like the myth versus reality, the best way that you can in a dramatized, fictionalized, construction of someone's life. Because the way it's structured is sort of Townes Van Zandt telling you the myth, and then it's kind of interspersed with a look at, to the best ability, like the reality.
Right.
You're kind of going back and forth, and you're kind of weighing the narrative constructed by artists in a sort of like retroactive way, like in retrospect rather, and then seeing how life really was. I think that's a great juxtaposition.
And I think it's interesting that the screenplay is credited to Hawke and also the real Sybil Rosen, who's played by Aaliyah Shawkat in this film, but she was Blaze Foley's wife at one point, and I mean, plays a pretty significant role in his life. Do you think movies like this are better when you have like a real person kind of behind the scenes guiding it? Or do you think that it's better if you just have the artist sort of taking control and putting their own spin on it?
I don't know if it's as simple as which one is better, just because people would think with like a based on a true story type thing, they tend to sort of give a level of authority to the people that were closest to it. An example that I can think of right now is like the George and Tandy miniseries. Was based off of Georgette's book, and she was kind of one of the guiding voices. Yeah. But there are some like historical issues there because like Georgette was so little, and like a lot of her timelines get kind of mixed up. And so I don't know that it's as simple as this or that is better. I think ultimately it comes down to, was the truth communicated? I think as long as that's your guiding principle and that you come away with that, I think either way could be successful. I think in this situation, very good that Sybil Rosen was there, and because it was like kind of based off of like her book, right? Like living in a treehouse in the woods, something like that. Yeah. And so I think it definitely made this movie a lot better in this case, for sure.
I agree. And so this was not Ethan Hawke's first directorial effort, but it was his first in a little while. So when I was researching, it looks like the last narrative feature he directed was called The Hottest State. That was in the mid-2000s. It's an adaptation of his own novel. And something I love when you have an actor directing a film like this is they're really good with actors. And also, if you have Ethan Hawke directing, he's got a great reputation. He's been in the industry for a long time. He's got friends, and he can call them up and bring them in.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I'm going to read you some actors who have small supporting roles in this film. Okay, you ready?
Steve.
We've got Chris Christopherson in his final on-screen appearance, Sam Rockwell, Steve Zahn, and director Richard Linklater as oilmen who decide to get into the music business, and then the great Wyatt Russell as not the leader, but the guide of this kind of commune.
Yeah. Kind of like sort of like the ringleader in terms of he seems to be the one that's brought all these people together.
What did you think of the supporting performances?
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I love, you and I both have a lot of love for Wyatt Russell. I think anytime it's great. Like he always seems to like probably give more of himself than was ever asked of him.
Yeah.
And he does so well with it every time. It was so great. I love the trio of Sam Rockwell, Richard Linklater, and Steve Zahn, because that's like, love that the way they did the whole Zephyr Records thing, because that's what Zephyr Records was. It was these guys that like made it big or rich in the oil field. They thought in their right minds, like, let's start fucking right. Like, I don't know, just that arrogance, that sort of arrogance.
And then they immediately put all their money on Blaze Foley.
No disrespect to Blaze Foley, because that's not, Blaze didn't want any of that.
Yeah.
And you learn that through the film, is Blaze was never that kind of, he wasn't aspirational in that way.
Right.
I think he wanted things to be organic and natural, and he was always deeply critical of like these systems and like the way the music industry was set up, and these systems of exploitation of rich people, profiting off the art and the
Yeah.
work of actual artists. The way they did it with that sort of like Texan arrogance, their big cowboy hats. They fancied themselves as cowboys, probably.
Right.
They're probably just a bunch of rich dipshits. Yeah, and then like they put all their money on Blaze Foley. They get him this opening slot for Kinky Friedman. He famously sabotages that, destroys the fucking hotel they got from him. And then right after that, Zephyr Records tanks and never really gets off. But like he was able to record like a single, I think, that was out. That was like and in the movie, you see that's kind of like that moment where it seems like, oh man, Blaze might actually turn this around.
Yeah.
He's
right.
You know, and like Sybil's back and she's proud of him and like she's like ready to go to the Kinky Friedman show, but she sees him just tank it for himself. Yeah. But yeah, I love Chris Christopherson. Got a cigarette? Yes, I do, Chris Christopherson. I do have a cigarette.
I think what's so upsetting about him tanking that Kinky Friedman performance is because immediately after that, when they come and yell at him about racking up the hotel room bill and all that, he is like spiraling because he thinks she didn't even show because she didn't stick around because he was on stage.
She left during the performance, and then I was watching a documentary where she said, and that was the last time I ever saw him. Like, I never saw him again.
So tell me a little bit about that documentary, because I know you watched it. I did not. Is the information similar to what's in the film?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it just gets a little more into sort of like his specific philosophies, because you have people like talking about the way that he thought, you know, and kind of like his ideas on life. And you hear a little bit more from Sybil herself about things. There was a lot of really good information for sure. But if you see the movie, you're going to come a lot with the same kind of like beats and the same like checkpoints of information that you get in the movie. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the lead performance. Ben Dickey plays Blaze Foley. He is a musician by trade. He's acted in a few projects. He actually has a credit on The Hottest State, which Ethan Hawke directed back in the mid-2000s. And he had never really done something like this before, though, where he was carrying the entire film. And I think he's absolutely incredible. He's this big guy. He can kind of oscillate between being a teddy bear and this hulking, intimidating, just kind of force of nature. And he sells both. And sometimes he's doing them like in the same scene.
Yeah, kind of going back and forth.
Yeah. So what do you think of Dickey?
He was great, man. That picture cars can't picture you. That shit. No, he was fantastic. I think, you know, and when you're talking about a guy like Blaze Foley who had like these incredible highs, incredible lows, it's like incredible like hot and cold attitudes too. Like he can go from, you know, almost like elated and full of joy, and maybe in some cases, maybe manic. I'm not going to try to diagnose Blaze Foley here, but like you see him struggling with that. He's kind of like, it's polarization, and the way he weaves through all of that kind of simultaneously often is just really incredible to see. He really brings a lot of empathy and a lot of humanity to it that I think is, I don't know that he probably would have thought in himself to be able to do that, but like, it was really impressive. It was really great.
I agree too. And so I'm thinking whenever you're saying that about the scene where Sybil comes home from work and he is in the bathroom, a total mess, and he has written a song on the walls of their apartment. And it just seems like this guy has completely lost the plot, but also he's still really good at this.
Yeah, he's still very great at it. Yeah.
So as far as the music goes, because Ben Dickey is a musician, he actually played the songs on the soundtrack. I mean, do you think he does a pretty good job covering Foley?
Yeah, I think it's very competent music. It is a little strange just because like Blaze had like such a specific type of voice.
Yeah.
Very booming, very low. And I don't know if that's exactly Ben Dickey's range, but I mean, it was good music. I wouldn't say it was like, because I don't think he was trying to like necessarily recreate and mimic Blaze Foley. Like I think he had to sort of bring himself into it. And I think they're pretty, you know, like really respectable like covers of his songs.
Two other performances that I want us to talk about.
Let's do it.
First, we've already talked a little bit about Aaliyah Shawkat.
Yeah.
But she is phenomenal in this. I knew her from like Arrested Development before I saw this movie, and I had never seen her do something this grounded where she's really holding the center of the story. I mean, just where did this come from?
I would love to know. And because she's really great at that, because if you look at their story, you see it like you almost see like the inevitability of its demise, you know, and it's like she is really great at sort of capturing that kind of the contradictions of believing in all of this possibility and potential with Blaze.
Yeah.
But also seeing the writing on the wall, quite literally, in certain cases, that what she thought this was going to be versus what it is are at odds. And the way that she kind of holds those two things together. And like even just in the expressions, like, you know, and then the final scene where she basically says, time has come where I can't be your muse anymore. You know, just kind of the pain there of having that much love for someone, but still knowing that this is only going to destroy you. Because she had these goals and these dreams and these aspirations, and she wanted the same for Blaze. Like she bought that guitar for him. Like she was always supporting his writing. She wanted them to do it together. But she would, like, you see it throughout the movie, like, whenever she sees Blaze pull a Blaze, she sees that impending dread of, like,
right,
this isn't going to end well, is it? And she keeps trying. And it's like, it's so incredible to see her take that journey.
I think that scene you're talking about where she says she can't be his muse anymore,
Mhm.
I think that's kind of the key to the whole film, because his life, at least as portrayed by this movie, is really defined by that relationship and then its absence. And his response when she says, I don't think I can be your muse anymore, is he says, I think you're just getting started. And it feels like that pain is really what's driving him after they split up. You know, we talked about this having a nonlinear narrative and kind of some downbeat moments. One of my favorite decisions they make is they go from them getting married. They have like this hold on a slow motion shot of them at their wedding, kind of jumping up, and it's joyful and fun. And then it cuts to one of those framing devices where you have Townes Van Zandt doing the interview, and it's immediate. He goes, yeah, when I met Blaze, he had just gotten divorced. And I think that's such an incredible tonal matchup where you're giving the audience kind of whiplash, and you're like, yeah, you feel this joy. It doesn't last. We're going to tell you that straight up. And now you get to watch the relationship fall apart. I think that's such a bold, creative choice.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's a really good point.
So let's talk about Charlie Sexton as Townes Van Zandt.
Oh, yeah.
The movie doesn't really have a traditional villain, but I guess he's the closest thing you have to an antagonist, just because he's sort of perpetrating this false narrative and idea of who Blaze Foley was and what he represented, and almost sort of twisting it for his own gain to kind of burnish his
this
reputation.
Sort of like romantic mythologization of him.
Yeah. And I think that's a role that you could very easily have that played in a way where it's like a Disney cartoon villain, like Jafar or something. But I feel like Charlie Sexton brings a lot of humanity to that character. And also he covers a Townes Van Zandt song that's just like devastating and amazing. Did you feel like he performed?
I think he did. I think he did a really great job, because you're right. Like he probably the closest thing you have to an antagonist, but still with a lot of humanity there.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it was malicious, but I do think, like, especially when you think about Z's reaction to Townes throughout the interview, it's kind of progressively getting like, okay, what are you doing here? What are we doing? Because like, you know, the story about digging up Blaze Foley's grave, and then, you know, Z's like, you know, I don't remember that. It's like, oh, you weren't here for that one.
Yeah.
And then you see kind of like he because he saw Blaze in a very intimate kind of way, and like, you know, he was with Blaze throughout all of this, and to see like Townes kind of turn these stories into these sort of myths, you know, and kind of stripping away a lot of the complications and the contradictions and the very human aspects of Blaze, ultimately to, you know, a lot of ways kind of serve his own ego and his own connection to Blaze and the sort of like music history of it, you know, and the retelling of the narrative. And I think they both do a really great job kind of getting to that tension between those two things of how Z would like Blaze to be remembered as his friend and as a human being, where Townes kind of, you know, playing up.
One of my favorite lines I wrote down was whenever Townes is telling one of those stories and he's talking about a dream Blaze had, and he says like Jesus came to Blaze and said, you never turn your back on family. And then it cuts over to Z, and Z says, did he say that in Aramaic? Just so good.
It's so good.
And then he eventually, of course, Z storms out because he can't take it anymore. But I think it really does get to this really interesting idea of, can the person be big enough? Like, do you need to mythologize someone like Blaze Foley, who had such an incredible life and made such deeply personal art on their own terms? So, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I mean, you see that a lot. Like, I think we do create myths out of artists, and we do, you see it like a lot with like Fleetwood Mac and like the narrative of the self-destructive like group. It becomes bigger than the work itself. And I think that can be fun. A lot of it to me is like pro wrestling kayfabe, though, to be honest with you. It's a lot of the myths of these characters we've created out of people. Sure. Because yeah, when someone gets that big, like you do, and also too, like people that sell things know that's what people do. And they themselves will then use that in order to sell it back to you and get you to think that what you're doing is believing in this bigger thing, when in reality what you're doing is just buying into the marketing and the framing. So I think you always have to wrestle with those two things.
I agree with that completely. I had some random thoughts that I put down that we can just kind of run through really quickly. Just some things I wanted to hit. First off, I love the way this is filmed. Like, I think just the color on the film looks great. It looks like an old photograph almost. It's got kind of this sepia tone to it. And then the way the camera moves in certain segments, especially when you first get introduced to the outhouse. So Blaze is coming in to play his show, and I don't even know if you noticed, but like the camera is just wandering around the space while he's up on stage talking. Like, it's not on him, it's focusing on the patrons.
And like in the way that it's fixating on these like sounds that are being made that ultimately get captured in the audio. And so he's focusing on those little like human moments of a night at the bar. So not even like this is the great outhouse performance. Like this is a night at a bar that people just pressed play on. Yeah.
And you've got that one segment where the guy's like on the phone getting mad at Blaze, and Blaze is getting mad at him. Yeah. Because one thing you learn over the course of the film, that if there's one thing Blaze does not like, it's people talking during a set.
Does not like to be interrupted.
No. There's that incredible meltdown at the blues bar in Chicago, I believe, where he's like on stage and trying to play it kind of cool and not get mad, where he's like, I'm a person and I got these things called feelings if you want to pay attention to me. And then he just like loses his shit and storms out and tries to fight the owner.
Yeah, I think that's also the one where like he destroys like the guitar. Because Sydney's there for that. Yeah. And she's like, what the fuck, dude? Can't hold it together for 5 fucking minutes and play the songs? Yeah, and he can't do it.
No.
He ultimately can't do it.
Speaking of Sybil, I had 2 notes here. So one is when they have their breakup and he says to Sybil that he loves her, but he needs to let things that aren't love take him. And I just wrote brutal. And then the meeting with Sybil's parents and how like uncomfortable and awkward and kind of sweet. It's like for him, like he's trying so hard to make a good impression, and he's doing his little folksy sayings, and they're just not having it at all.
Because he loves Sybil.
Yeah,
he does. He loves.
It's like honest.
It's an honest love, but it's just not a love that they conceive of as sustainable.
Right.
And I love that you brought up this scene too, because it's another one I was thinking about in terms of Alicia Shawkat's performance, of that sort of always wrestling with the possibility with Blaze versus the sort of grounded reality that she's come from. And you see that come through with the meeting with her parents. Like you're seeing like, okay, so this is the life you come from. This is ultimately a lot of the stuff that's shaping the way that you're making decisions too. Like as much as you want to rebel against it, these are these core foundational things for you. And I think that she does a really great job at, you kind of see a lot of that tension already being weighed of like, oh wow, you really do see the sort of the inevitability of this relationship's demise, even in that moment, based on the way you see this interaction between the parents and like Blaze, and seeing these two versions of her life collide in this way was a really telling moment.
Well, and the thing about their relationship, at least the way it's portrayed in the film, is the first part of it when they're living in the treehouse and as part of the commune with Wyatt Russell there putting on Shakespeare plays or whatever.
You have to always mention it.
You do have to mention it. He's the only person who's ever played a character with my last name in a film. He plays Zook in 22 Jump Street. So he's always had a special place for me.
Yeah, of course.
But they're living in this like insane fairy tale where they're in a cabin in the woods.
Responsibilities.
No responsibilities. Like, I mean, their life seems both wonderful.
They're just like
and
reading and fucking all the time.
Nonstop.
That's all they do.
And it was very stressful for me because, as you know, I enjoy the comforts of a home, a modern home. And I was like, I don't think I would last a week.
You think the honeymoon phase of like just being with your lover in the woods kind of wears off pretty quickly.
Well, it doesn't help that my fiance would kill me if I put her in that situation. She would be like, no way.
Let's go fish. Let's wash all of our clothes in the river.
It'd be great. Let's cook naked every day.
Yeah,
You know what? I might
is
try that.
romantic. This is romantic.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to call out: when Blaze dies at the end, he's shot. It's a very upsetting scene. You don't actually see him get shot. You see like the light from the gun, you hear the shot, and then he kind of stumbles out, and you know he's been shot. And the sound, they just ratchet up the sound of his breathing and kind of gasping for air, and it is so horrific to hear. It's so effective too, because it's not like a gory scene. It's not played for anything kind of salacious. It's just like deeply, deeply human and troubling.
Yeah, because it's a way to think about mortality in a more existential sense, I think, as opposed to just, the sort of the trauma porn and like the gore porn, or just like wanting to see blood and guts.
Yeah.
But you're able to think about death in a much more human way. And they really capture that really well, I think.
And then after that, Z and Sybil go to the house during daytime and are kind of walking around, and she's just in this place where he passed. That's also really, really hurtful, because it's like this was someone with so much potential and so much life ahead of them. And they kind of died in this place that doesn't have any real symbolism to it, like there's no deeper meaning here. It's just kind of an empty house.
Yeah. And that's because, Blaze is basically, he died in poverty.
Yeah.
And like, he spent his time, just on the porch of this man, just playing songs together, and it's really interesting too, because all this was part of Blaze's life that Sybil never saw.
Right.
She can only imagine it based on what the Blaze she remembered, and kind of watching her sort of try to put all that together. And like, it was really heartbreaking, and also really just speaks to how great Alicia Shawkat is in this movie in holding a lot of these contradicting things, and like the way she plays it with her expressions, of seeing all these truths come together in ways that she can't fully reconcile. There's something really beautiful.
Well, and then the very end of the film, it cuts to black. You're going into the credits, I think, even. And then there's like this coda where Alicia Shawkat goes to a graveyard and she's trying to honor Blaze. And you have the groundskeeper walking by, and he actually gets the last line of the movie. He's like, and then, she's trying to explain, and he goes, "Sorry for your troubles, but everyone's got some." And then it just cuts to black, and that's the film.
Yeah, like throughout this whole thing, you see Ethan Hawke basically trying to deconstruct the mythos of like the troubled art.
Yeah.
By always constantly bringing you right back down to reality. Like, look, he had made great music. This was a man.
Yeah.
And it's, at the end of the day, unexceptional. That's an unexceptional scenario to be in. Like, everyone fucking dies.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been shot, man. A lot of people, he's probably, that groundskeeper probably lost someone just 2 weeks ago. You don't know. And yeah, just the way that Ethan Hawke is constantly like trying to kind of like challenge the sort of idol worship. And even, especially when it comes to like the troubled artist, because it's easy to romanticize the poverty and like it's sort of like glorified in some way, or like to see it as like sanctifying almost.
Yeah. Like
that there's sanctification in your suffering. And I mean, I hate to be like, that bitch, but like, not really. Like, like it's not, fortunately, like there's nothing like glorious about it, and I think you see him like in the way that he has these moments kind of push against the way in which we create idols out of human beings.
I think that's a really interesting read on this. I would love to have Ethan Hawke just talk a little bit about what he wanted to get across with this.
Because he's on the record of saying that he hates biopics.
Right.
But he keeps making them.
Well, his film after this was Wildcat about Flannery O'Connor. And, I think this is a more successful film, but still, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's very interesting too. Yeah. And like, so it's interesting, like, so you hate, and I think you see his hatred of biopics come through because he's always doing shit like that.
Yeah.
He's always doing something to try to deconstruct the myth of someone.
Yeah.
And always try to bring them back down to earth somehow, while still also acknowledging and even celebrating the great art that they made. So finding a way to like celebrate the work and their contribution without turning them into like little gods that we've created for ourselves.
Right. Like there's no need. They can just be a person. Like that is enough.
And I think that's a lot of that's a lot of celebrity culture too.
Yeah. So I think that's everything I had. Do you have any other thoughts? Is there anything we didn't talk about with Blaze that you wanted to get on the record?
I don't think so, man. I thought that was a really guided conversation.
Well, it's because I had an outline for us to follow. Thank you for recording. You know, I wish. If it was off the cuff, I would have probably said some really insane shit.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining me again. Where can people go to keep up with you and your work?
My work. Oh, wow.
You know, you write.
My work. I
write
sometimes, occasionally.
You write very well. A fan.
Thank you. It's not as frequent or as often, but I'm constantly trying to think about ways to keep it up. But I do have a little music blog. I mean, it's on Substack. It's called Sound Conditions. There's an Instagram for it at Sound Conditions. Yeah, they don't need my personal stuff. They can just get that.
You don't want to plug Sloop John B?
They can come find me if they want to.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm at Sloop John B on all the socials.
And how do you spell John?
JAWN, is
as you do.
As you do. My love for the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, and apparently the city of Philadelphia.
Have you been to Philadelphia?
I've never been.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I didn't think so.
I've never been to Philly.
And that was our episode on Ethan Hawke's 2018 film Blaze, with my good friend Shane Longoria sitting in as my guest. If you enjoyed yourself, and I certainly hope you did, please remember to rate, review, and follow us. It's an easy way to support the show and help people find us. Next week, I'll be back with something a little different. Instead of a film, I'm going to be talking about the new film incentives that were passed into law this year in Texas with Ian Loomer, the president of the Dallas Producers Association. Ian is incredibly knowledgeable about this topic. We've already recorded this episode, and we had a great discussion during it that I'm very excited to be bringing to all of you. That episode will go live next Tuesday, but in the meantime, I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you at the movies and on the dusty trails of Texas.